Uh, as you can see from my title, I am going to be talking a lot about the efforts of the American Center for Mongolian Studies, but I also have an archaeology research project in Mongolia, and because I couldn't resist, I threw a few slides in at the end, so I have two smaller presentations within my time slot here, because it's just too tempting to talk to this group of people about both of these exciting things that I'm balancing in Mongolia. This also comes nicely on the tail of what Josh was talking about with capacity building in Mongolia. A lot of what the ACMS is trying to do is to improve a lot of the ways in which we can preserve cultural heritage in Mongolia, and particularly both the physical things that we're finding, but also the data. You know, all of this survey data, Josh, that you're getting, all of the digital data is something we have to really start thinking about as well. Everybody in this room doing work in Mongolia has thousands and thousands and thousands of files, right, from your work in Mongolia. But what is happening with that? What will happen with that if you step away from your work? And so that's a lot of what I've been working on with the ACMS. Right now we have 3 years of funding, of which we're about halfway through for our cultural heritage program. We support cultural heritage fellows coming to Mongolia in a variety of disciplines. It supports my position as the cultural heritage coordinator, and then working on other grants and other programs that are related to cultural heritage. All of us with individual projects in Mongolia, we can put some resources and attention towards these kinds of issues, but I would argue that hopefully by the end of my talk you'll be convinced that the ACMS might be kind of a nexus, a way to make the little bits that each of us are doing, kind of combine that into a sum that's greater than its parts, right? By coordinating efforts together. Cultural heritage issues and preservation is a big topic. Not one of our projects can handle it, but if we all pitch in a little bit in terms of resources and attention, perhaps we can tackle some of these issues. The primary goal of the ACMS, for those of you who don't know, is to support research in Mongolia. That comes in lots and lots of different forms. Financial support for students and people starting out in Mongolian research, hopefully people who will find careers in research there. Supporting projects with logistics, financial control, border permits, visas, etc., holding conferences and workshops, those kinds of things are stuff that the ACMS can help your project to do and your students to do in the country. We also have a number of different ways we can help you to get your information out to people. If you're traveling to Mongolia, to do your research, I would really, really highly encourage you to get in touch with us to do a speaker series, for example. About every other week, we have somebody talk about their research in Mongolia. We have great conversations at conferences like these, but it's also important that we're having these conversations and presenting our research in Mongolia, where Mongolian scholars and the Mongolian public can access this easily as well. In addition, we have something we're calling the Mongolia Field Notes. So these are really short publications, more like blog entries, to help get your information out in a virtual format pretty rapidly, just kind of updates about what you're doing in the field. This year, we're also proud to be working on the Ambassadors Fund for Cultural Preservation project, improving the inventory system of the National Museum of Mongolia, and potentially through other museums in Mongolia as well. Recently, there have been a lot of issues. For example, Bill mentioned at the beginning the paleontological smuggling case of the Tibetar skeleton, but there's also other issues going on in cultural heritage, things missing from museums, things being smuggled out of Mongolia. And so a new cultural heritage law passed in the Mongolian government says that everything must be inventoried. And that's the right step to take. We really have to know exactly what's in these collections in order to protect them. But as a result of this, a lot of institutions are really being bogged down for the resources of both time and money and people just counting things. So every 4 years, and in some cases, some collections every 2 years, everything has to be counted. Every little thing has to be counted. Right now it's all handwritten in logbooks, and so we're trying to introduce barcoding and other inventory systems to help really speed that up. We don't often, as archaeologists, I don't think we're paying enough attention to the way that our things are being curated and the way that they're being conserved. And so something I think we could all spend a little bit more time doing is thinking about those conservation efforts. We do a number of different kinds of trainings. In the last year, we've done things on geophysics and PXRF. We're going to be doing some things in magnetometry, hopefully some other kind of methods to help folks in Mongolia to get some of these techniques. And as I was just mentioning, we're kind of really hoping to start thinking a lot more and perhaps start founding some conservation study projects in Mongolia. Josh, I don't think you said it, but I think you were going there. Part of the reason we should be focusing a little bit more on survey is because we have a lot of stuff, and stuff that's not being taken care of very well necessarily. And so I think we really have to step up our game in that area. Another exciting thing we're doing at the American Center for Mongolian Studies is trying to found a laboratory, a checkout laboratory with equipment. So thanks to donations from Dr. Will Taylor here, we've started this kind of new area where you can, as your project finishes up and you have to do something with your equipment, encourage you to consider giving it to the ACMS, where we will give it in turn to other scholars who will use it. So Will did this amazing project using 3D scanning. That 3D scanner is now available in Ulaanbaatar for any kind of researcher who comes to the ACMS and says, boy, I could really use that technology, that equipment in my own research. So we're looking to get things like drones, other kinds of microscopes, other kinds of equipment that we archaeologists use. Oftentimes people do this, they give their equipment to the institution that they're working with, great, but sometimes it disappears, is broken, is not accessible to researchers at other institutions. And so the ACMS is kind of a neutral Switzerland of Mongolia, can take researchers from all these different institutions without kind of any political mess there. The big thing that I talked about in the beginning is this digital data management program. Folks at the Smithsonian and the ACMS have been talking about this for a little while, and I think we're going to have a conversation tomorrow morning that might talk a little bit more about this, that Bill will be leading. But using this platform that the Smithsonian is developing, but also potentially some other database management systems and programs that are available, we have to find a way to preserve our data and also be able to share our data pretty easily between us, because I can't tell you the number of times that people come into my office and say, I'd like to study ethnic minorities in Mongolia because it's never been done. That's not true at all. You know, we lose track of data and who's done what and where it is and who to contact. And so having kind of repositories and networks of people, which is leading me to my next thing, you probably all will be receiving emails from me shortly asking for you to be part of my research registry. That kind of just gives us a short bio, just as in our program here, short bio about what you're doing, who you are, what your project is. Too many projects who are doing similar things don't know about each other. If we're trying to do interdisciplinary research, you know, how are we reaching out to the ecologists, the biologists, the geologists, and what are all the different programs up to? Where are the good connections to make? So I'm hoping our online research registry might be one way to do that. Finally, if any of you are going to be in Mongolia in June, I'll be organizing a conference that's trying to help bridge some of this divide between cultural and natural studies in Mongolia, a very artificial divide in a lot of ways. I haven't reached out to too many people here because I'm not sure about schedules. It's a one-day conference. We have no money to help get you there, but if you're going to be in Mongolia during this time, please reach out to me because we'd love to have you be a part of that. Another thing that the ACMS is doing that I think is really important is working with, for example, student groups that are coming to Mongolia. And this steps a little bit away from the research, but in a situation right now where our federal funding and funding is really tenuous, I think it's really, really important that we not just talk to each other. We're pretty good at talking to other archaeologists about what we're doing, but we're maybe not so great at talking to the public and others interested. So I call this building cultural allies. So students, tourists, other people, we need to really engage them and show them the importance of our work. Those people will vote, those people will donate money, those people will become involved in projects and speak the wonders of archaeology to their friends and colleagues. And so we really need to be reaching out to them just as with just as much effort as we are reaching out to our colleagues about what we're doing. That's it for that part of the talk. But I'm going to jump right in and tell you a little bit about my Northern Mongolia Archaeology project. These really are kind of two separate things for me. There's a lot of ways in which they overlap, but this Northern Mongolia Archaeology project is really my research project. I think we haven't had a lot of information come out on it yet, so this might be a great time for me to talk to some of my colleagues here about those things. We're right on the edge of a lot of really interesting information coming back to us, so I don't have a lot to say. We're sending out a ton of radiocarbon dates right now, exciting new collaborations with Dr. Taylor, potentially that might help us do what Bill Honeychurch was saying at the beginning, talking about some of these metrics and genetics studies with some of the faunal remains that we have. So the work that I do is international, people from all over the world coming to work together, usually half Mongol, half foreign team, approximately. Interdisciplinary. I really try to include geologists, botanists, ethnographers, and I'm always looking for new ways to incorporate other kinds of research into what I'm doing. It's about research, it's driven by the research, but it's also a field school. So this is a way for me to fund my research and get the labor I need, but it's also what I was talking about with ACMS, building those cultural heritage allies that we so need. I'm working here in the very northern part of Mongolia there. I've done so far 2 different surveys at Targanor and Soyo, approximately 70 square kilometers of survey for Josh's numbers now. The aims of the project is really to understand hunters and gatherers and how they're starting to incorporate herding. Again, with what Bill Honeychurch said in the beginning, these hunter-herders. I think in my region, more than some other areas of Mongolia, the economy is a lot more fluid. Sometimes they're focusing a lot more on hunting and gathering, and sometimes they go towards pastoralism, but it's not linear. Sometimes I think it goes back to a stronger focus on hunting and gathering. And even to this day in the region, this is where the reindeer herders of Mongolia live, even to this day, there's a lot more focus on hunting and gathering for daily subsistence than in many other regions of Mongolia. I hope to tell a really great story about the Neolithic, Bronze Age, Late Bronze Age of Mongolia, but not only that, I really want to fit it into a continuum of research, of a story that's going on. There's cultural anthropologists and ecologists trying to trace back the land use patterns in Mongolia, going through historical sources. They get back to the medieval period, Genghis Khan, and that's about as far back as they can go. Archaeologists are in the unique position to be able to talk about things farther back into the past. So we can talk about today's mining, economic changes, and the impacts of climate change, but this is not the first time that Mongolia has experienced such widespread changes. I might argue, given the national identity of Mongolia being inextricably linked with pastoralism and herding, one of the biggest changes, the most consequential changes, was probably during this period in which pastoralism kind of becomes the thing in Mongolia, but yet we know not a whole lot about it. So that's kind of why I'm focusing there. And then this cultural preservation and education, obvious links to the field school, But in addition to that, this site of Soyo, which was found by Bill Fitzhugh and Bayer Sechan about 13, 14 years ago, something like that, used to have permafrost pretty close to the surface. Permafrost is now somewhere 1.5 meters to 2 meters below the surface. So anything that might have been preserved in that is going to go away pretty rapidly. Another threat to this site is the construction of a tourist camp. So there's a local entrepreneur not interested in the archaeology at all who's going to be building a tourist camp here. And so we're obviously concerned about what that might do to the site itself. So a couple of shots of Soyo here. It's kind of right along the river. We have about a 400-meter long area with intermittent sand dunes, and inside these dunes is where we're seeing some of this stratification. If you've seen campsites from this period, almost everywhere that you're going to see them in Mongolia, they're very shallow. We have about 7,000 years of history in 10, 15, 20 centimeters of sediment. Here at Soyo, magical place where deposition is just happening in such a way, and cultural activity is also happening in important, exciting ways. So we get this 1.5 meters to 2 meters of deposition where we have nice stratified layers where we can start to really kind of pick apart some of these things. Last year, thank you. Last year we were able to get down right on top of the glacial till and found lithics in an occupation that we formerly did not know about. So now we know that the site extends, our geoarchaeologists' best guess, 15 to 20,000 years ago, which was much older than we had thought that we were going to find there. We use a lot of different methods. As I mentioned, I'm about out of time. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but this is some of the interdisciplinary kind of things that I'm trying to really focus on. I think that's all I've got. So thank you very much.
Questions? Thank you for this talk.
Can we just speak English and go there?
Yes. Can you speak English and go there?
Yeah, the Mongolian language.
Can you work in Mongolia without Mongolian language?
Travel in Mongolia without Mongolian language? Yeah.
We could.
So I was talking to Dr. Amatushin just last week, and he was saying something about a new initiative on the part of, and I didn't pay attention that closely. It was the Mongolian government or the ministry or one of the governmental organizations for returning to this idea of the national catalog and the national database for sites. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yes.
What is going on with that? Because I just looked at it briefly.
Sure. The Cultural Heritage Center of Mongolia is kind of the repository. All museums, institutes, anybody with a cultural heritage program, collections, whatnot. This is where that inventory information has to go, is into this Cultural Heritage Center, is kind of the central place. So this is about inventory. The data management programs that I'm working with ACMS are a little bit more focused on research, providing information for research. So if you want to see maps of locations of things and counts and sizes of things, the Cultural Heritage Database, they have that. But what they don't have is all of the other kinds of files and information that we might collect on things. So they're sending out teams to do surveys of places. They're taking all the inventories. Is that what you're talking about, perhaps?
Who is organizing? What is the framework?
The organization is called the government office is called the Cultural Heritage Center.
Okay, it's under the Ministry of Culture, Education.
Yes.
And all of that.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
And their funding.
Yes, I think so. So they have a number of IT people working on the database. I think the database may have come from some Japanese money initially, but
It came from Dan Rogers.
maybe it could be.
He started this project years ago.
This is also including art and intangible cultural properties, not just material culture and archaeology. But a couple of years ago, there was supposed to be setting up a basically IMEG by IMEG survey.
Yeah.
To inventory all the archaeological and monument kind of stuff in those places. I'm not sure that ever actually happened, but that was the plan.
It did happen. It was funded by people who didn't know how to do the survey. They didn't know the typologies. They blew a lot of money. They had publications that are worthless.
So definitely, that's the problem we've talked about in the past is the right and the left hand in Mongolia. You know, the ACMS is trying to offer services so that people can kind of reach a point where we can, you know, have a comprehensive program, and it can only happen if the different institutions in Mongolia will agree to collaborate. Because right now the problem is everybody is doing their own thing their own way, and sometimes okay, and sometimes not doing it all. So, you know, and I think the researchers, some of us here in this room, we have a lot of data too, and we haven't, you know, we haven't done anything either. So, you know, I would also urge the people who are doing research in Mongolia to be in touch with Julia and the ACMS because, you know, for instance, what you're doing, there's very little information. It's not like we can have a central place where everything goes. There can be a network of agreement, you know?
It's all in here.
My biggest fear is that I'm doing all of this work, I'm digging up these things, I'm collecting these things, and that information is just going to be gone. Archaeology is ultimately destructive and finite, and so if we're going to be doing this, we really have to think about where those things are going.
Oh, so, well, first of all, I'm actually one of the Cultural Heritage Fellows, or I was last year, but still working on that, obviously. But just to echo what Julia's saying about, you know, the importance of creating these sorts of databases that people can use. And there's actually it was a really interesting situation the other day that I came up with. The Cambridge did a oral history database, and just as something was published using material from those interviews in the Journal of Asian Studies, right, which is a major journal. People were sort of talking to Chris Koponsky, who is one of the creators of that, one of the managers of that database, about, you know, oh, I can't access any of these interviews in Mongolian, and he was like, oh wow, I didn't realize people were using this still so actively. So I think that's a very great model, but also kind of shows that, because actually there had been some issues with kind of the database being transferred to another part of the site, but yeah, so yeah, I think that kind of points to the issues of actually, it is hard and it takes labor to put these things together, and it's not always obvious how they're being used, but they are really important, I think, as well. So.
Microphone's coming.
I'm just wondering, do you envision, are these databases, cultural heritage, envisioned as being bilingual, fully bilingual?
Absolutely, that's really important. There's a ton of Mongolian data that's really inaccessible until you get really good at Mongolian. There's a whole lot of information out there that's really inaccessible. And then us focusing on all this English, I can't tell you the number of times people have said, when is your dissertation coming out in Mongolian? I just don't have those skills.
Translate them ourselves.
Yeah, but absolutely all of these things will have to be bilingual. In order to be useful, effective, and really cover. You know, there's too many people, grant proposals that come in, projects that come in that don't cite any of our Mongolian colleagues, Soviet colleagues that came before us. You know, they're citing people in this room, but not scholars who have infinitely more experience than anybody in here, and that's unfortunate.
And one way that will be solved is by the Mongolian students who are now getting PhDs in American programs and have made translation already a major part of their careers. So those skills and that motivation will be more available in the future.
Absolutely.
Well, I just wanted to say that, I was actually conducting interviews with Mongolian archaeologists, you know, in Mongolian about this summer, and they were telling me also that they feel pressured to be doing the bulk of this sort of translation work. So I think that's also something that's very important. And I actually did write a field note about kind of the importance of more people being bilingual, not just the Mongolian scholars being bilingual. So I just wanted to put that out there.
They felt pressured, or they felt they needed?
They feel burdened. They feel very burdened. Yeah, that they have to be doing, you know, literally translating, you know, at field sites and things like that. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Are you by your side here?
I'm not gonna say who I was talking to, but it's not just one person. It's something. It's a I'm a cultural anthropologist, and I could write how this is a theme that is prevalent. So, and not just in archaeology, of course.